I have 17 pieces of paper and no bulletin. So we'll go from memory and see how this goes. We've been had the slideshow going here, and it got hung up on youth night, and that's fine. Wednesday night teen program starts back September the 1st. We're excited about that. Of course, children's church is starting back on the 5th, and we have all of our materials in the office. Miss Pam was so gracious to order that for us, and anyone that is listed as a teacher on the schedule, there's a book for every teacher that is on the schedule. So thank you so much for doing that, Miss Pam. And the schedules are back there for children's church and for the Wednesday night teen program. And if anyone is not on that list that would love to teach or be involved or help, we will not say no to any help. So if you want to, you can never have enough. The more individuals that are helping, the better that will be. And the fact of the matter is, I always heard if it takes one man 10 hours to do a job, it should take 10 men 1 hour to do a job. That math sounds good, but you know the truth, and the 10 men just stand around and talk for 2 hours instead of working. But in something like this, when you have more hands, many hands make light work. So please, if you want to be involved, please be involved. Also, our mums, we're ordering mums from Green Acres. Green Acres. I don't know, Green Acres is where we'll be ordering our mums from, and those orders are due this Sunday. So please, please, please don't miss that time, that deadline. They'll be delivered here to the church. We're going to have them all up front here. We're going to leave them until our homecoming services, and the day of homecoming, you can take those home with you. So if you'd like to do that in memory or in honor of someone, please put that on the order form. Or if you just want to order some, you don't have to do it in memory or in honor of anyone. My wife doesn't know. I filled ours out today, and I have that in memory of my mother-in-law, her grandmother, and my grandmother. So it's just a nice way to include individuals that have gone on to be with the Lord in our services. So, and yes.
Bloom will come later, and that's good because we want the blooms to come around homecoming. So when they come, they'll be just nice and green, but eventually they will bloom. I don't want people to think they're going to get a mum and it's all bloomed out. You don't want to do that. You want it to bloom eventually, and that's what it'll be.
Flowers are like basketball teams. You don't want them to peak too early, because then they lose out in the NCAA tournament. So the mums will be green and ready to bloom, and then we're going to pray that they stay green and ready to bloom, and then on homecoming morning, they're all bloomed out, and you can take them home and plant them or whatever. We're going to take ours home and kill them because we can't keep any plants alive. We have big plans for the mums that last about a week, and then they'll be thrown away. But those of you who have green thumbs can keep them alive longer. Homecoming Sunday, again, is the last Sunday in September. We posted on Facebook an event. Please share that with as many folks as possible. Share that with everybody on your Facebook friends page. Anybody you're friends with, share that with. We want to have a huge homecoming Sunday, and we want to have a bunch of folks come. Maybe folks that used to be here and have moved away, or maybe they've moved on to a different church, or whatever the case may be. We want to have a big homecoming service. That'll start at 10:30 a.m. We will not have Sunday school or children's church on homecoming Sunday. 10:30 we're going to start. We're going to have some special singing, special guests. Hopefully some of our kids will sing. We're going to talk to our children's church workers about that. Surprise, I just mentioned that for the first time. And then the Generations Quartet will be singing for the Eric Albright's new quartet he sings with, and we're really excited about that. But I think that's all the announcements that I can remember and recall from memory. Is there anything else I have forgotten? I was going to say, I just remembered something I have forgotten. The water for Beale School. People have been bringing that in. I saw cases of hand sanitizer as well. We will continue to collect that, and we'll do this ongoing throughout the school year. So if you're out and you think to get an extra case of water, the small bottles of water are good, but also if you get a case of the big bottles of water, we'll take those as well. Tomorrow, I'm going to head across the street and drop off what we have so far, but don't forget that and continue to do that throughout the school year, because I don't think they're going to let them drink out of water fountains anytime soon. So it's something, it's a blessing we can be to the kids and the teachers. And also the blessing box down at the Mason County Animal Shelter. Remember that as well. Our teens built that, and if you are out and you have an animal, pick up an extra bag of dog food or cat food. If you can't take it down there, bring it in, and we'll have a team do it for you. So, is there anything else that I've forgotten? All right. How about praise reports or prayer requests? Do we have any praise reports this evening or prayer requests?
I have a praise report. Mom had her second surgery and comes here really good. And they moved her today. Dad got moved on Monday over 5th floor rehab. And Mom got sent today.
Amen.
So both of them are starting rehab. Mom has a long haul ahead of her, but God took care of it so far, and I know He will continue.
So they're both at Holzer Rehab on the 5th floor.
They live in the same room. After being married 65 years, they cried.
Oh.
For a week, so today they were very happy.
Thank God for that. And thank God they're able to be together. Candace would probably cry if they brought me into the room. After a week's break, she'd say, why did you bring him in here? But how sweet. Who says that romance is dead? 65 years, they're still happy to see each other, still want to be together. Oh. That's wonderful. So glad to hear that they're both steadily improving. It's a long road, but we know that God will be with them. Any other praise reports this evening? Or prayer requests? Do we have any prayer requests? Unspoken for Tammy and Bobby. Any other prayer requests this evening?
My non-church friend asked if we have a prayer chain here, and she asked if we would put on the local nursing home in Braxton County that they had 8 patients and 4 workers with COVID.
Braxton County Nursing Home. COVID outbreak there, and it's scary in a long-term care facility like that. So be in prayer for them. Is there a name for that, Miss Margaret, or is it just Braxton County Nursing?
Braxton Healthcare.
Braxton Healthcare. Okay, we'll be in prayer for them. We'll definitely always pray for our non-church friends too. Any other prayer requests this evening?
Continue to remember Bethany. For those who don't have Messenger or didn't know Bethany Wood, she has autoimmune. Now she has COVID, so she's pretty sick. And she's asked for prayer for her and her little one. And she said that Matt was doing well. And I talked to LD, and LD was telling me that Matt is one of the most loved people there, a very hard worker. So, I was excited to hear that. And she said, yeah, remember Matt and their family. So just want to lift them up and continue to remember them.
And speaking of Matt, I received a very nice letter. I'll share that with everyone on Sunday from Friends of Sinners, expressing their gratitude for the church's prayers and gifts and different things that we've done. It's a wonderful ministry. It's a much needed ministry. And I'm happy and proud to partner with them in a small way for what they're doing. And I think it's a wonderful work that they're doing down there. And they're from Kentucky, so, my old Kentucky home far away. But any other prayer requests this evening?
There is so many people that I know that suffer with COVID right now.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin, I don't know if Kevin and Mandy Craft has been mentioned yet. They have it. Brad, Sherry Powell, and her daughter Kylie. Caitlin Parker lives on McKenna. She's on 6. And, it's just an action. Keep the children in that school in prayer. Sherry says she's 100% on the mend. Kylie's getting better, but Brad had to go to the ER because he had pneumonia, but they let him go home with an open tank. So she said he's doing better. But Kylie's only been Michaela, and Sherry said she's doing a lot better. I haven't heard anything from Michaela and McKenna yet.
We need to be in prayer for those. Brad is a good friend, also a Kentucky fan, which makes him. But pray for that family. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, for Dennis and Brenda Weaver and their son Denny and his daughter Erin, they all have stroke.
Also, Miss Renee Young, we need to be in prayer for her. Many of you know her. Sweet, sweet little lady. She was at PVH. Was sent to PVH. So be in prayer for her. Any others this evening?
Louise gave me a note for the Mary Wright. She's an mail carrier here in this area, and having a real struggle. She's got 3 children of her own, and her brother messed up on drugs and stuff, and she had to take in 2 more children and kids. Unfortunately, he beat her up because he said she was taking his kids. She was doing it for the children. She's going to probably require some keep her in prayer.
Mary Wright. Any others this evening that we?
If you could remember my great Aunt Marie, that was my grandpa that just recently passed away. His sister, her family's all messed up, like I said before, but they had a brother pass away that they did not speak with a few weeks before my grandpa passed away. Then my grandpa passed away, and then our family's so big that half of them I wouldn't know if I seen them out. But her granddaughter just recently passed away. And my aunt gave me news of that, and I guess she left behind 3 babies. They don't really know what happened to her. So keep that family in your prayers, especially in the news.
Definitely be in prayer for that.
What?
Oh. I thought somebody else said something too. Any others this evening before we go to prayer? I would ask you pray for, I cannot remember her last name, lady in Kentucky in her late 40s, early 50s, and believe her first name is Tammy, and she has had some complications because of COVID. She has some children, young children, teenage children, and they will be taking her off the ventilator tomorrow, and they do not expect her to make it. She was a friend of my sister-in-law's all through high school, so be in prayer for that family. God knows their last name and all the important details, so just be in prayer for them. Brother Steve Bateman, as you just came in, you care if I put you on the spot and just have you pray for us this evening, brother?
Heavenly Father, we come to you this evening, Lord. Thank you for this opportunity to be in your house. Thank you, Lord, for your watch, care, and protection upon us throughout this week so far. Lord, we ask that you be with us through the rest of the week. Lord, we pray that you be a whole prayer for us as been mentioned. Lord, you know each and every need. We ask that you give each and every one according to your will. Thank you, Lord, for the answered prayer. Lord, we thank you for our pastor and his family. We pray your blessings upon him. Pray that you give David with the message you have to hear tonight. Pray for someone who's not saved, Lord, to accept you personal Lord and Savior. Lord, we can't thank you enough for everything you do. We thank you for the rain you sent our way. Thank you for food on our table, Lord, for safety on the road. Thank you for everything you do for us, Lord. Lord, we just ask your blessings upon this service. For the rest of the in Jesus' name.
Amen. Well, Steve, I'm sorry I put you on the spot like that. I just looked up and made eye contact with you, so yeah. He knows I like to pick on him a little bit, but he likes to pick on me a whole lot. Turnabout's fair play, so. But this evening we've been going through, well, we started and then we stopped abruptly just the next week because we had some things come up. We started a series that I said was going to be a little bit different. It's going to be more of a teaching series, I'm going to try to teach and not preach as much, but sometimes that's really difficult for me to do. But pastors are supposed to be apt to teach. So we started a series a few weeks ago called 3 Lies and 3 Truths. And I said, we're going to go through a whole myriad of different things, a whole bunch of different topics. And first week we did 3 Lies and 3 Truths about church. And the way the study is going to work, the way we're going to kind of go through this, we will tell a lie that is kind of accepted generally, sometimes just by lost folks, sometimes by church folks and lost folks. Sometimes it's just a lie that we've heard so much that we accept it as truth. And then immediately after that lie or that misconception, we're going to tell the truth from God's Word. And we did 3 Lies and 3 Truths about church, and that went over pretty well, I think, but it was really hard for me to teach that and not preach it. I got a little preachy, but I promise I'm going to try and teach more. But 3 Lies and 3 Truths about science. Now, before we get any further into the topic, I will just go ahead and let you know, I don't have any PhDs in any kind of molecular biology. I don't have a Nobel Prize in any sort of scientific study, but I think it's very important that we address practical topics on Wednesday nights because we're all Christians here, right? Most of us all are Christians here, I would say, on Wednesday night crowd. So we need to just look at some practical things. 3 Lies and 3 Truths about science. Now, why I came to the science realm has nothing to do with COVID, so don't panic. I'm not going to stand up here and bash people about anything to do with our current situation. I know that a lot of people, there's a lot of hard feelings, but that's not what this is about. This is about our kids mainly because they are starting back to school, and this is about our adults also because we have come to accept a lot of things, and it erodes away the foundations that we should have as Christians. It erodes away the faith that we should have. We place our faith often in man, and we forget about God. And so that's why when we're looking at these 3 Lies and 3 Truths, different ones. Now next week we're going to look at 3 Lies and 3 Truths about joy, so it'll be completely different. But I thought it was very important to address some practical topics. First off, science, the definition of science, the intellectual and practical activity encompassing the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation and experiment. Boy, ain't that pretty. I think it's important that we get a few definitions out of the way, but basically all science is just the study of the natural world, of things that you can see, things seen, things that cause things to move, chemical reactions, all those things. Most all of us made it through high school science. Some of us had to take chemistry 3 or 4 times, so we must be really good at it. Some of us even blew stuff up in chemistry lab, which I love to do. Some of us left the Bunsen burner on and almost got expelled from Rose Hill Christian School, but maybe that's just me. So that's the first thing. That's what science is. Now, I think it's very important when we're talking about science that we have to understand something that we have all heard at one point in our lives but have all probably forgot. The difference between scientific theory and scientific law. Scientific theory is based on related observations and scientific investigations. Scientific laws can be observations of similar events that have been observed repeatedly. So you can look through that whole list if you want. We're going to leave it there just for a minute because we want to talk about theory and law real quick. Scientific theory is something that has not been proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. It's not something that is observable and repeatable. It's just a best guess. An example of a theory would be the theory of evolution. Because it's not observable, it's not repeatable, it's a theory. Now the problem is, in the world today, evolution is taught as a scientific law. It is a fact. If you don't believe in evolution, you're an ignorant backroads Bible thumper that doesn't know anything. You're not scientific, and that's just simply a lie from the pits of hell, because by their own definition, it is not a scientific law. It is not observable, nor is it repeatable. The Big Bang Theory is not observable, nor is it repeatable. It is a theory. So a theory would be like this. If I'm setting up here and I would make a hypothesis, I would say, okay, I hypothesize, which is just a guess, I hypothesize that there will be more women in the service this evening than men. And then I sit up here and observe. And then there's 5 women that walk through the door in a row, and then 2 men. And then my theory would be, okay, so out of every 7 individuals, 5 of them will be women. That's a theory. It's not a fact till everybody gets in here and I can count them. The problem with science and the scientific community today that they take their theories and they just preach them like gospel. And people believe it. People just accept it. When you tell somebody that you think the earth is only 5,000 to 7,000 years old, they look at you like you have 3 heads, because obviously it's 550 billion years old. Depending on which scientist you ask, which day of the week, they can change that number, and they can say, well, I have the degrees and knowledge to back it up. It's just theory. It's not law. Scientific law is observable and repeatable. Here's a little something else about laws and theories. But what I like to remember about scientific laws is observable, repeatable theory. Theory is based on an observation. It's your best guess. The problem is not that we have theories. The problem is that the theories get over here in the law section. So don't believe somebody just because they tell you something over and over. It is not true. I can tell you over and over that I'm 6'5". That doesn't make me any taller. I can tell you over and over again that I'm the best looking guy in the state of West Virginia. That doesn't make it true. That might be my theory, but it's not a law. It's not true. So why are we going through all this, Brother David? Well, I think it's very important to establish a few things about science today. One, people accept science like it's gospel, and it's not. The only absolute truths in this world come from this book right here. They don't come from anybody sitting in Harvard or Yale. Nowhere like that. It comes from this word. Our children go to school. Now, we have a lot of good public school teachers, don't get me wrong. But our children, maybe not in Mason County, but definitely if they go to a public university or college, they're going to have this garbage crammed down their throat every day that what we believe as Christians is just a fairy tale. Because, obviously, scientists say it, so it must be true. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, too. But I just wanted to get a few things out of the way when we're talking about science, what science is, what is scientific theory, what is scientific law, because I think it's going to be very important as we push forward into the study tonight. There's going to be 3 lies, and then we'll hit you immediately with 3 truths following, and there'll be some discussion in between each one. The first lie, science can explain everything. Many feel that scientific knowledge is the key to understanding everything in the universe. Some scientists believe that given enough time, experimentation, and observation, all the, quote, mysteries of the universe will be revealed. Now, I have a couple of quotes here. Now, these are leading scientists, and I don't believe nor agree with anything they say. I just want to show you the ignorance of man. Science, this is a quote from a man named Brian Greene. Brian Greene is a foremost knowledge holder. I don't know what you'd call him. He's a professor, he has several doctorates on string theory, nonlinear equations, a bunch of garbage that doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, but he thinks a lot of himself. He's on NPR. If you listen to NPR, please stop, because it's the most left-wing, crazy bunch of people you ever met, and that's just your pastor telling you that because it's the truth. Turn on a Christian radio station. Don't listen to National Public Radio. They're a bunch of communists, and that's just a fact. But he says this, Brian Greene, science is a way of life. Science is a perspective. Science is a process that takes us from confusion to understanding in a manner that's precise, predictive, and reliable. A transformation for those lucky enough to experience it. It is empowering and emotional. Sounds an awful lot like he's peddling religion and not science, doesn't it? Sounds an awful lot like he's peddling a way of life and not simply studying to gain knowledge as he claims he is. And then Stephen Hawking, who is a gentleman, and I feel very bad for him. He was struck by ALS at a young age. He had a terrible disease, so I'm not making fun or poking at him, but he was one of the biggest atheists and narcissists that ever lived. And he says, God may exist, but science can explain the universe without the need for a creator. Foremost minds in their field right here. Brian Greene, Stephen Hawking. Science can explain everything. Science can tell you where you came from. No, they can't. Science can tell you all about your disease processes and why you get older. No, they can't. They will lie to you and tell you that they can, but science does not explain everything. They like to think they do. They're very narcissistic in their thinking, because when you get rid of God, you yourself can become a god, right? You don't need God. Science explains it all. And since we know everything about science, then that makes us like gods. That sounds an awful lot like the devil in the Garden of Eden when he said, if you eat this, you'll become as a god. What was that called? The tree of knowledge of good and evil. They think science explains it all. Science explains everything. It does not. Matter of fact, science can't even tell you where we came from. Science can't tell you where we're going. See, that was the lie. This is the truth. Truth. Only God explains everything. Things science has never been able to explain. The source of matter. What is matter? Anything that takes up space, has volume, matter. Anything you can see, touch, feel. They can't tell you where it came from. They say, well, the Big Bang, we had all this energy. These molecules bounced off each other, and then they blew up. Where did those molecules come from? I think I told the joke before about the group of scientists. They got together and they told God, they said, God, we can make a man just like you did. He said, okay. They got the dirt and started to gather it up. He said, no, get your own dirt. Science cannot explain where life came from. Science cannot explain where matter came from. Science cannot explain where energy came from. Science cannot explain the source of hope, love, and joy. Ask a scientist that's a devout atheist and a scientist or an agnostic that's a scientist who doesn't believe in God or thinks God has absolutely nothing to do with man. Ask him about hope, love, and joy, and you'll be hard-pressed to get an answer that you can understand. To him, it's just a bunch of chemical reactions. It's a bunch of goobly-goos that doesn't make any sense. Science cannot explain everything. It can't even explain these three basic questions. Where did we come from? The Big Bang. Did you know the Big Bang contradicts every scientific law known to man? Because objects of motion tend to stay in motion. That's what Sir Isaac Newton discovered. An object will not stop in space because there's no gravity until it comes against an opposing object. So if something blew up in outer space, it would just keep going. It would never stop. How did we get all of this? They can't explain it. Science doesn't explain everything. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not anti-science. I believe we should study science, but it does not explain everything because there's only a few things that God can explain. God can explain all of this. God can explain everything. The source of matter, energy, and power. Genesis 1 through 3. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. Where did it all come from? God. Where did God come from? He doesn't have to have a beginning. He is the Alpha, the Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. He is He that was and is and shall be forevermore. Well, that's just a cop-out. How can you say God explains everything? Because I have faith that God explains everything. Because the Bible tells me God explains everything. And just FYI, this isn't about how science explains everything. But if God only gave you those first few words in the beginning, God, that's all that you should have to believe in Him. But instead, He gave you 66 books to explain some things to you, and He was not obligated to give you any of it. But He did because He loved you. He gave you 66 books to explain. All He really should have to give us is in the beginning God, and we should be good enough with that. But man has decided that they don't need God, so they're going to explain Him away, but man can't explain this. God explains it in the very first chapter, the very first paragraph of the Bible. Where did matter, energy, and power come from? God. Hope, joy, and love. Science cannot explain hope, joy, or love. But in Colossians 1:27, I read these words. To whom God would make known that is the riches of the glory of this mystery among the Gentiles, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory. What do I have hope in? Where does my hope come from? My hope's in the Lord. Where does my faith come from? My faith is from God. Where does my joy come from? My joy is seated in the Almighty. You can never have joy, peace, hope, love, any of those things truly until you know God, until you know Jesus Christ. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God. And everyone that loveth is born of God, and knoweth God. He that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love. In this was manifested the love of God toward us, because that God sent His only begotten Son into the world, that He might live through Him. Herein is love, not that we loved God, but that He loved us, and sent His Son to be a propitiation for our sins. Beloved, if God so loved us, we ought also to love one another. 1 John 4, 7 through 11. How do we know about this concept of love? Because God introduced it to us. In the Garden of Eden, God showed His love to man at the very beginning when He took His own hands and made him and patted him out. That was an act of love. Breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. Love. We would not understand love without that breath. We could not feel love without that breath. Because let me tell you something, your dog might really like you and lick your face. He doesn't understand what love is. Your horse might love to see you coming, probably because you got an apple or something to feed him with. He doesn't understand what love is. Only man understands it. Why? Because God gave us the breath of life. Where does hope, joy, love, all that come from? God. Science cannot explain it. I watched a documentary, it's been a few years ago now, and they were talking about emotions, and they were talking about love, and there were 5 PhDs on there in a row, and not one of them could explain why man loves another woman or their brother or their sister. They couldn't explain it. There's all these chemical reactions and all these charts and all these graphs and all these CT scans and MRIs. They had no concept where it came from, though. It came from God. Science cannot explain everything. Only God explains everything. Lie number 2, science requires no faith. I love this. It's one of my favorite lies about science. I had someone tell me one time, oh, you're a man of faith. I'm a man of science. You have to have more faith to believe in your science than I do to believe in my God. There's more proof about my God than there ever is about some of the theories that you hold. Lie 2, science requires no faith. Many believe that having a scientific view of the world means you're not required to have faith. Rudolf Virchow, I think is how you say it, said this, a noted atheist back in the 30s and 40s. Belief cannot be reckoned with in terms of science, for science and faith are mutually exclusive. And then Tim Minchin, who is a comedian, a noted atheist, and I think he's also Australian, so don't hold that against him, says science adjusts its views based on what's observed. Faith is the denial of observation so that belief can be preserved. I want you to think about that for a moment. This man has a microphone. People listen to him all over the country of Australia, where he's from, one of the most popular people there. He says science adjusts its views based on what's observed. Faith is the denial of observation so that belief can be preserved. That's what the world, by and large, thinks about us as people of faith. That we deny the truth so that we can keep our faith, and that is not true. Our faith shows us the real truth. See, the problem with individuals that have big mouths and big microphones and they say things like this is that there are lost folks sitting out there listening to them. And until we get some Christians with some big mouths that explains to them that God explains everything and not science, that our faith doesn't make us ignorant, it makes us a lot more intelligent, they're never going to hear what we have to say. They're never going to understand that we're not just a bunch of backwoods, ignorant hillbillies that don't understand anything about the natural world until someone tells them the truth. The truth is that they've been lied to their whole lives and sold a bill of goods. That science answers all their questions and that their science requires no faith because it is provable. And that is just simply not true. You see, science requires a lot of faith. Science requires faith in man. Faith in man's abilities, faith in man's intellect, and faith in man's honesty. Faith in man's ability, we think an awful lot of ourselves as human beings sometimes. Man feels like he can decipher the great mysteries of the universe because, well, he's man and he's the top of the food chain in his mind. Faith in man's intellect, men think that we assume that we're the smartest beings in the universe, which is not true. God is. If we could actually take 1/100th of the knowledge that God possesses and put it in our mind, our brains would explode because we wouldn't be able to comprehend it, what God knows that we don't. God has forgotten more than we've ever known. I've heard that, but God never forgets. Faith in man's honesty. There's been time and time again where it's been proven that noted scientists have just out blatantly lied to have works published, to have papers pushed through, to have things approved because their ego couldn't take it that they were wrong. We have to understand that it requires a lot of faith in man to put all your faith in science. You see, science requires faith in education, faith in academic integrity, faith in educators' knowledge, and faith in degrees, diplomas, and awards. Science places faith in the created and not the creator. So it's like this when we're talking about the theory of evolution. You know, a lot of the things that they say that they've discovered over the years, they find a bone fragment about that big. And they construct an entire species around it, and that's the truth. Radiocarbon dating, they say, well, we'll take a rock from the ground and that's 5 million years old. We have radiocarbon dating. How do you explain that, Christian? Did you know a radiocarbon dating center won't even date your fragment that you send unless you send to them how old you think it is? So here's the way that works. We find a piece of petrified chewing gum out in the parking lot. I take it and I send it to the scientific minds at one of the radiocarbon dating centers. And they'll say, well, how old do you think it is? I'll say, well, I think it's about 1 million years old. Me too. They wouldn't do that to us. Yes, they do. Daily. Go down to the Creation Museum. Do yourself a favor. Brother Charlie, Miss Connie, praise God, they were going to see Noah's Ark and to the Creation Museum. Ask them when they get back what they learned about radiocarbon dating. It's a lie. It's not even a guess. It's not even that scientific, to be honest with you. But they preach it like it's gospel, and we just chew it up. Well, he's got a Nobel Prize in radiocarbon dating. So what? I got a Nobel Prize in gum chewing. I mean, who cares? They just award and reward each other's ignorance. And people just gobble it up. People just take it in as fact. And they put all their faith in these quote-unquote scientists and these men of science. And they think nothing of God. They think nothing of the honesty. They think nothing of things like Proverbs 24, 1 through 9 that says this. Be thou envious against evil men. Be not thou envious against evil men. Neither desire to be with them, for their heart studieth destruction, and their lips talk of mischief. Though wisdom is in a house builded, and by understanding it is established. And by knowledge shall the chambers be filled with all precious and pleasant riches. A wise man is strong, yea, a man of knowledge increaseth strength. For by wise counsel thou shalt make thy war, and in a multitude of counselors there is safety. Wisdom is too high for a fool. He openeth not his mouth in the gates. He that deviseth to do evil shall be called a mischievous person. And though of foolishness is sin, and the scorner is an abomination to men. Well, that's real pretty. What's that mean? That means that a lot of these quote-unquote people of science that lie to Christians daily, they're just fools. And we just lap it up. We just lap it up. We just listen to them. Third lie, science does not need God. Science does not need God. Many scientists believe that the study of the natural world does not require God. In believing so, they set up science as their God, little g. Stephen Hawking also said this is an extension of the quote I read earlier. What I have done, is to show that it is possible for the way the universe began to be determined by the laws of science. The laws of science, which he completely ignores, but he calls his theories law. See how that works? See why we had to learn and do a little vocabulary lesson? The laws of science, which he completely ignores, says that this is fact. In that case, it would not be necessary to appeal to God to decide how the universe began. This doesn't prove that there is no God, only that God is not necessary. Stephen Hawking, one of the most respected scientific minds of our time, says God is not necessary. He lied to the public by saying scientific laws backed up his studies, when in fact it was just scientific theory, which is not a law, it's just a guess. They made a movie about his life, The Theory of Everything. I've never watched it. Why? Because I don't want to choke on the ignorance that is spewed in it. I don't want to sit and have to scoff as I listen to him lie about the way the universe began, because I know it. J.B.S. Haldane said this. He was a noted scientist back in the 20s through the 40s. My practice as a scientist is atheistic. That is to say, when I set up an experiment, I assume that no God, angel, or devil is going to interfere with this course, and this assumption has been justified by such success that I have achieved in my professional career. I should therefore be intellectually dishonest if I were not also atheistic in the affairs of the world. He said, I'm so successful, I have to be an atheist, because God has never done anything to affect any of my studies. God is not necessary. Lie. Science does not need God. Truth. God is the giver of all knowledge. Psalms 53, 1 through 2, the fool hath said in his heart, there is no God. Corrupt are they, and have done abominable iniquity. There is none that doeth good. God looked down from heaven upon the children of men to see if there were any that did understand, that did seek God. Proverbs 9, 10 through 12, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the holy is understanding. For by me thy days shall be multiplied, and the years of thy life shall be increased. If thou be wise, thou shalt be wise for thyself. But if thou scornest, thou also shalt bear it. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. You see, the problem with these noted scientists that we hold in such high regard today is that they completely ignore the fact that without God, they would not have breath in their lungs to study anything. They would not have any brain in their head to even make up a theory without God's grace and mercy that He bestows upon them. Every day that they get up and they set out to prove that they are God's and God is not needed and God is just a little g and they are the big G's, they forget that it's the mercy of God that allows them to live. They forget that it is the grace of God that doesn't kill them where they stand. See, God still allows them to breathe. That's mercy. That's how much He loves and cares for humankind. The fool has said in his heart, there is no God. You see, some of these men, these scientists that we base all of our lives on now, they forget that some of the noted scientists of old, Albert Einstein, Louis Pasteur, even Charles Darwin, did you know they all said that there was a God before they died? They all said that the more they studied science, the more it pointed them to a creator. Even Charles Darwin, the man that we vilify so much as Christians because he came out with the theory of evolution and popularized it, and his Origin of the Species became the Bible by which atheists and communists and everyone else that stands against the things of God would push for the next 50 to 60 to 100 years. Do you know that even Darwin himself said that there had to have been a creator? That it only made sense that there was a God. Why is it then that we follow these men and women so blindly? We just accept anything they say as law, as fact. We send our kids out into the world and we don't correct the television shows they watch when they're like, well, this dinosaur lived 5 million years ago. And we don't say that's not true. We just let them watch it and gobble it up. You see, it's not the older Christian that I worry about with the scientific community. It's the younger people and all the garbage they get. What are we doing to stop it? What are we doing to tell them that's a lie from the pits of hell? You can't say that. Yes, you can, and you should. We have to take a stand. Because here's the problem when we put science on such a high pedestal and they take away the things of God and they take away the need for a creator. If you don't have a creator, if there is no God, we're all just animals, why should we act any differently than a monkey? They kicked God out of school. They pushed him out the door. And I'm not saying that this happened out in Colorado, but you remember Columbine when that happened? That's one of the most liberal states in the union at the time. They were doing more to push out any source of God, any mention of God in any public schools. Then they had this terrible shooting that was a huge accident. And what was the first thing they did? Let's all pray. Can't have it both ways. You can't forsake God until you need Him. You can't pretend and only be a Christian when it's okay and it works for you. For the Lord giveth wisdom. Out of His mouth cometh knowledge and understanding. He layeth up sound wisdom for the righteous. He is a buckler to them that walk uprightly. He keepeth the paths of judgment, and preserveth the way of His saints. Then shalt thou understand righteousness and judgment and equity, yea, every good path, when wisdom entereth into thine heart, and knowledge is pleasant unto thy soul. Discretion shall preserve thee, understanding shall keep thee. Now, I don't believe that we should discount studying science. And I don't believe that we should discount gravity. I mean, scientific law. Guess what? It falls at the same rate of speed, too. Terminal velocity. All that's true. What I'm saying is that we should discount as allowing individuals to set science up as God. When we study science, it should be through the lens of God. When we look at what things are going on in the world today, it should be through the lens of this Bible. Everything that I think should be revolving around God. What I think about science comes from God, not from man. Candace sent me a little thing earlier, and I didn't have it in time to put it up here, but it was talking about trusting in science. And I laughed, so I'm going to share it. She's shaking her head like you shouldn't say it. I'm going to say it anyways. You should see it's all these ads from yesteryear, and it's this little baby. It says, no bugs on me because of DDT. You guys remember DDT? Killed more people probably than cancer. Caused cancer. Asbestos, we used to spray it everywhere. That's fireproof. Spray it on there. That's a crib. Wrap it in asbestos. Science. There was even a little ad of a pregnant lady, very pregnant, smoking a cigarette. Says it calms her nerves. Science. Unchanging. They're the smartest men in the room. I remember when I was in nursing school, we had to read an article from Time magazine from 1982, and it was praising cocaine as the next wonder drug. A whole article, not like a page, like 5 or 10 pages. Time magazine. That's a well-respected, that cocaine is good. That's what people said back then. Then 5 years later, Nancy Reagan was saying, just say no. Why do we put so much faith in something that changes so much? You ever notice that no one says they do medicine? I'm a nurse. What do you do? I'm a nurse. I do medicine. No, I practice medicine. Why do we say we practice medicine? Trial and error. We really don't know what we're doing. They used to take ice picks and shove through people's eyeballs and pull out chunks of their brain if they had mental health issues. And they're like, that's top of the line right there. Take that piece of brain out. Lobotomize thousands of poor souls. Why? Science. So it's not that we don't believe in science. It's just that we believe in God more. You see, it's not that you shouldn't study the things of this world to understand them. God encourages it because He knows the more you study it, the more you'll see Him. But only take what they say sometimes with a grain of salt. Acts 17, 27 through 31. We'll end with this. Acts 17, 27 through 31. That they should seek the Lord, if haply they might feel after Him, and find Him, though He be not far from every one of us. For in Him we live and move and have our being, as certain also of your own poets have said. For we are also His offspring. For as much then as we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the Godhead is like unto gold or silver or stone, graven by any art of man's device. We ought not to think of God as anything that man can explain. Because there are certain things that when science comes to the end of the road, the only answer they should be able to have is God. The problem they have is when they circumvent that answer and they're like, well, we're going to go around Him because we don't like that. He's not of gold or stone or anything that you can make. And the times of this ignorance God winked at, the times of this ignorance God winked at, but now commandeth all men everywhere to repent, because He hath appointed a day in the which He will judge the world in righteousness by that man whom He hath ordained, whereof He hath given assurance unto all men, and that He hath raised Him from the dead. You see, this is when Paul was speaking to the men and women on Mars Hill. Remember that? Areopagus? They gathered daily only to hear some new thing. And so Paul went up and they were ignorantly worshiping the unknown God. And he said, the unknown God, this is who I preach to you today. Somebody ought to preach a sermon about that one time. Maybe they'll call it Nothing New to Say. I don't know. It's not that we don't want knowledge. It's that we want knowledge. And we want it to surround us. And we want it to be from God. Whenever man circumvents God, it is a disaster. When our children go to school, and if maybe not in the school they're at now, because we got a lot of good Christian teachers in this county, I thank God for them, but when they go to college, when they go out and they're starting to make their own decisions, we should be able to tell them why evolution is a lie. We should be able to tell them why we don't just swallow every gobbledygook that they push down our throats just because they have PhDs behind their name. We should be able to tell them why. We should be able to educate ourselves and look deep into things and not just accept it on face value because somebody on TV told me. We should look at it through the Christian worldview and not through an atheistic worldview, which a lot of these gentlemen and ladies have. So, 3 lies, 3 truths about science. It's a little different, but I had fun with it. And I wish I would have had those ads in time because they're pretty hilarious. But next week we're going to look at 3 lies and 3 truths about joy. You know, God wants us to have a joyous, victorious life, but that doesn't mean that we're always going to be happy. God wouldn't allow that to happen to me because He only wants me to be happy. That's a falsehood, because sometimes we're going to have pain. Sometimes it's not going to be enjoyable, and a lot of Christians get discouraged because they believe a falsehood that just because I'm a Christian, God's going to answer every prayer I throw up, and that's not always true. It's not always true. So that's what we're going to look at next week. 3 lies and 3 truths about joy. Let's pray. Dear God, Heavenly Father, I come to you and I thank you so much for this evening. God, I thank you for our church. God, I thank you for a good crowd on a Wednesday night after a hard rain. And God, I just pray now that you would be with us as we go home. God, I pray that you would just bless us all on the road, give us safety, bring us back at our next appointed time. God, I thank you for visitors. I thank you for family that have come in to visit. God, I just thank you so much for loving us enough to give us this church where we can come together. We can enjoy the good times together. We can support each other through the bad times, God, and we love on each other as you love on us. And God, thank you for that. Pray that you would be with those that are in the hospital now, those that are sick, all those that are suffering, and so many with sickness. And God, I just pray you'd be with them and just heal them, God. And thank you again